Thank you, Rachel, for that kind introduction. My name is John Norwood.
Slide this on top there.
Can you hear me now? Yeah? Great. Well, it's great to be here, and I am going to talk to you for 10 to 20 minutes about food and agriculture, and anybody who wants to come on in, listen and ask questions, please do. Secretary of Agriculture, I think, is one of the most important positions in the state of Iowa if we care about the direction of the economy, because this is an agricultural state, and if we care about the environment, the stewardship of our lands, the future of our farms, the quality of our water, the water we drink, the water we recreate in, and the water we fish in. So these are all parts of the position of the Secretary of Agriculture. But before I get into why the specifics of my presentation, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am first of all, I'm an Iowan. I am the Democratic nominee for this position. But as a Tip O'Neill-style Democrat, I want to work across the political aisle. And in fact, I have that experience as a Soil and Water Commissioner for Polk County. I have been working with Democrats and Republicans and independents upstream of Polk County, because Polk County happens to be blessed with two river systems, major river systems, the Des Moines and the Raccoon River. So it drains a large part of our Iowa agricultural system. And so my background experience starts on the East Coast. That's where I was born. People ask me, John, were you born on a farm? And I say, no, I was not born on a farm, but I was born in a farming community. In fact, one of the original farming communities in the country. The town today is the town of Wayland. It's a suburb in west of Boston, and it was founded as Sudbury Plantation in 1638. So farming goes way back in the communities and in the roots of America and where I grew up. I grew up 10 minutes from Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. That was actually the farmer's shot, and I think we need to recognize that farmers were, hey, how are you doing? Come on in. So farmers were the original defenders of our independence and freedom. And some of the forebearers of my town of Wayland, Sudbury Plantation, way back, fought in that Revolutionary War. So we got to recognize, I think, the importance of farmers both in our history and in our present day. Present day of our nation in providing for the productivity of our country and the world. Then I spent a little time after growing up. I went to college out in the Berkshires, a rural school, Williams College. Mascot is a purple cow. And so I got involved in agriculture in college as a history major, studied Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace was an Iowan who held several positions with FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and he was the father of our modern NRCS and FSA. These were all institutions that were created during the era of Wallace, who worked as FDR, Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of Agriculture. He was also a man of industry through Pioneer. And so I learned that at Williams College. Who knew that I would someday be spending a significant portion of my life in, that looks delicious, in Iowa. Came to Iowa in 2002, but quickly back to the story. After Williams, I went to work in Boston for one of the largest water utilities in the country, the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. They handle both water and wastewater, so I learned something about managing nutrients, and I learned something about building infrastructure, large infrastructure, water quality infrastructure, and drinking water infrastructure, as well as wastewater infrastructure. So that was my experience in Boston. And then I went off and picked up an agriculturally related degree at the Yale Forestry School. That's got some Iowa connections. Picked up an MBA and found my way to to the West Coast in California, and I worked in agriculture in California for about, the entire stay was about 10 years, and agriculture for about 4, running an agricultural land trust. So thank you for that. And worked with cattle ranchers and nut growers and city planners in Alameda County, which was 3 million people. That's about the size of Iowa, 3.2 million people. So that's the West Coast part of the tour. And then I have been here in Iowa since 2002, raising 2 children here in West Des Moines and being involved in food and agriculture. For much of that period of time, I've got a company, TBL Ventures, which is business coaching. As was referenced, I'm a soil and water commissioner for Polk County. I think in systems and markets. That's my background experience. And I'm a strategist, and so I think I will bring that kind of experience to the Secretary of Agriculture. So the idea, I think, with the Secretary of Agriculture is, broadly speaking, it's a person that has to represent producers and consumers, and we have to have an eye on the world and where the world's going. We need to think about the Secretary of Agriculture as the Secretary of Food, Land, and Water. Those are all parts of the position. It's a mission that's very broad. It includes promotion of agriculture. It includes protection of land and water resources. It includes promotion of looking at farming as an economic development strategy, which is especially important in rural Iowa. And also it includes protection of public health. So broadly speaking, that's the background of this position. What I'm going to bring to the position is the idea of representing all Iowans. We have to understand and represent our farming producers, but we also need to focus on the consumer side as well. Let me first say that Iowa is tremendously productive system. It's a top 10 producer in the world. And there's only one state that beats us in terms of the dollar value of the agricultural output. Does anybody know what that state that beats us, Iowa? California, that's right. You get a prize. And that's a state of 40 million people and 3 times our landmass. So California is a big state. Iowa, we're number 2. Proud of that. We're a number 1 or number 2 in corn and beans. Number 1, number 2 in ethanol, biodiesel. That's $5 billion for the economy right there. And I think that, and then 16 billion eggs. So you get the idea. We're a tremendously productive system as a state, but it's also a state that's out of balance. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of how it's out of balance, and there are others. The first is in terms of the water quality impacts. We send 1 billion pounds of nitrates down our Mississippi and Missouri River systems and into our reservoir, Saylorville Lake here, and that creates major drinking water issues, water recreation issues, access to water issues. Over half of our state waters are impaired, and the numbers are going up. The nutrient reduction strategy, since it was implemented, we're seeing the loading numbers 25% higher. And so I would submit that's good evidence that the solutions right now are not working. We need to begin to implement some of the innovative thinking that I've led here in Polk County, systematic approaches. So that's one example. A second example is soil loss. We have amongst the richest soils in the world here in Iowa, and in some cases we've lost 1/3 of the topsoil, 10 times the rate of loss that we make in any particular year. That's unsustainable. A third way we're losing we're out of balance is with respect to our rural communities in particular. So almost 70 of our rural counties are in population decline. And so these are all connected. They're connected by a highly productive system, but productivity is producing more with less, including less people. You add automation, you begin to get the idea. We need to do some things differently if we're going to have a highly productive but balanced system. Okay, John, what do you want to do? I want to add resiliency. I want to add diversity. I want to add inclusivity. I want to add flexibility to our system. Resiliency with the idea that one of our megatrends we're facing in this country is climate change. So we got to build a resilient system that's able to weather the drought we're in now, as well as floods. And that means having healthy soils. That means adding additional 3rd and 4th crops on the 23 million acres of corn and bean ground we have. We need a more diverse system. We got to be able to support farmers at the top end of the scale, those who are farming thousands of acres, helping them build markets and add the third and fourth crops, the oats, the barley, the hay, the rye, and so forth, building markets to do that. That might mean bringing back more livestock, outdoor livestock, which are important to soil health. And then we got to figure out how to support farming at the mid-scale, the 200 to 500 acres. That might be an integrated operation, and we need help with processing. We need to bring back processing. There's too much market concentration at the top end of the scale for companies that control too large a market share, both with respect to beef and pork. Then down at the bottom end of the scale, we got to make new opportunities for farmers who are black and brown and first generation white like me, who can't afford to farm at hundreds to thousands of acres. Maybe that's with 1 or 2 acres, beginning to get access. I have a concept called a farm park, which you can check out on my website, Norwood, 4iowa.com. And so we got to build in that resiliency, that inclusivity, and the flexibility of the system. A system, just like Saudi Arabia is the flexible producer for oil production. I believe Iowa can do that for the world. If we create a more productive, flexible system that can produce more kinds of crops, we should be thinking about how do we feed 3.2 million Iowans and the 80 million people within a day's drive of Iowa, because California, places like California, which supply more than half of our fruits and vegetables, is facing water drought. So that's a basic overview of why I'm running for this office. It's super important. I have a sense of urgency. I have focus that I'm going to bring to this position. And I would turn this over. One other thought is with the carbon pipeline, because I've been asked a lot of that on the trail, the 70-plus counties I've visited. I'm against eminent domain for carbon pipelines. I think they need to be done voluntarily. They need to be done fairly. They need to be done safely. Fairly means annual payments to landowners. Fairly means annual payments to counties that are impacted to help upgrade their EMS systems. And safely means figuring out how to transport a liquid carbon dioxide that if it got out, it's heavier than air, it would roll across the landscape. We saw this in Mississippi. And what do we use carbon dioxide for in our livestock? We use it to euthanize, to kill the livestock. And so we got to be super careful if we build these pipelines that they're not put next to schools and they have safety technology to shut off the valve if there's a pressure drop. We have a few minutes for questions. Anybody have a question? Yes.
Right now, federal law allows food to be patented. So Monsanto can patent the soybean.
Right.
And then if a farmer grows soybeans at the end of the year, if they want to use those seeds for the next year,
Right.
they're legally not allowed to.
Right.
And then Monsanto could put them out of business and buy the
Right.
take over, and then these big corporations sell the farm from China.
Right.
Are you going to do anything about it?
So your question's about genetics. Who controls the genetics of seeds, and what to do about foreign ownership of assets? And I think those are both important topics that we need to look at. The seeds, I think part of this is we got to have more competition in our farming systems at all scales. And so that means we're growing more things. And I think it would be a good idea to have seed diversity, both in terms of the kinds of seeds and also who owns the seeds. So I'm very mindful of that. And I think we also have to pay attention to foreign ownership of assets. I think, Iowans that I've heard, we want Iowans and Americans to own our farm ground and production of our assets. And in pork production, for example, we have Chinese ownership of Smithfield Foods as an example. And so we got to be mindful of, I think, being able to control our own destiny with our American food companies. So that's a great question. And one more, yeah. I got cattle farm. Yeah. Cattle is a good example of a market that's too concentrated, and so we need to add more transparency at the top of the market, the commodity system, but I would argue we need to have differentiated processing, and that means the building of brands. Direct marketing and Ocean Spray and Organic Valley are examples of farmers working together, having branded products. Nyman Ranch is a good example in the pork space, and so that's what I want to see us do in cattle. Ownership. Yeah, ownership is important. In order to build Iowa to last, that's the theme of my campaign. Iowa built to last. We have to think about ownership of our assets and our farm ground, and how do we steward that? We have a moral obligation, I think, in family farms to manage that farm, not just for the present generation, but future generations. And so part of farming is figuring out how do we do it in a way that we have that ownership, we have more ownership, because 60% of our farm ground is absentee owned in Iowa. And that number is going up. So that I want to think about how we diversify, build that resiliency, and ownership is an important part of that discussion. Thank you for that question. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Feel free to come up afterwards if you'd like to ask questions. Sign if you want to be on my mail list. You can sign the sign-in sheet there, and we'll see you out on the campaign trail. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.